Hello, everyone. Thank you for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, is hosting a webinar that will provide an overview of the AllPayer Combination option, one of the two tracks of the Quality Payment Program, QPP. Now, I will turn the call over to Trevi Davis, QPP APM Operations Specialist, Corey Henderson, QPP APM Communications Specialist of CMS, and Richard Jensen, Senior Advisor and Lead Staff for the AllPayer Combination option. Mr. Henderson, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for dialing in today. We are really excited about this call. We received a lot of commentary that we needed to have this call about the 2019 AllPayer Combination option overview. There's a lot of excitement and buzz about how to become a QP. That's the qualifying APM participant, and this is one of the ways that we are adding in participation. So look forward to more comments and questions at the end. Please move to the next slide. So again, as always, we'd just like to provide a disclaimer that this is in every way our way of providing reasonable effort to provide as much policy and background as possible. These are not legal statements or legal documents in reference to our statements here. They are summations of policy, proposed and final policy, specifically final policy from 2018 for 2019 policy. Today we do have online with us Trevi Davis, as mentioned before. He is our operations lead. He will be talking about alternative payment model overview. And then we also have the policy lead for the AllPayer Combination option, and specifically the lead who does a lot of the work and has a lot of the background. So look forward to some great background and information there. Next slide, please. So today we're going to provide you with an overview of APMs. We're going to talk a little bit about advanced APMs. Trevi's going to pass it over to Richard Jensen. He's going to talk about the AllPayer Combination option basics, OtherPayer Advanced APMs criteria, QP determination process, and then payment arrangement options. I will then pick up with the help and support, and then we will move to question and answer. Next slide, please. So without further ado, Trevi Davis for the alternative payment models.
Thank you, Corey. All right, let's move on to alternative payment models. So what is an alternative payment model? Alternative payment models, or APMs, are new approaches to payment models paying for medical care through Medicare that incentivizes quality and value. APMs are developed in partnership with the community of clinicians and offer incentives to those clinicians that provide high quality and cost-efficient care. The CMS Innovation Center develops new payment delivery models in accordance with the Social Security Act. Additionally, Congress has defined, both through the Affordable Care Act and previous legislation, a number of specific demonstrations to be conducted by CMS. So there are four main groups of APM. There's the CMMI models, there are the Medicare Shared Savings Program, the demonstration under the Healthcare Quality Demonstration Program, and demonstrations required by federal law. All right, next slide. So you can see here that within the universe of alternative payment models, we have two sort of subgroups in this Venn diagram: MIPS APMs and advanced alternative payment models. Basically, this grouping of APMs or these two groupings of alternative payment models fall within the greater universe of alternative payment models, and we'll go into those subgroups in further slides. Next slide. All right, so jumping into advanced alternative payment models. So what are the benefits of participating in an advanced alternative payment model? For performance year 2019 through 2024, clinicians who meet these requirements of the advanced alternative payment model are excluded from MIPS payment adjustments, and they receive a 5% lump sum incentive payment for their professional Part B services furnished throughout the calendar year immediately prior to the payment year, so between 2019 and through 2024. Please bear in mind that there's not an explicit incentive for 2025, However, in following years, qualifying APM participants would be excluded from MIPS reporting as always, and for performance year 2026 and later, eligible clinicians who meet the requirements for being excluded from MIPS as QPs will receive a 0.75 annual update for their services furnished through their qualifying APM, and participants in a non-qualifying APM participants will receive a 0.25 annual update. So we'll talk about what it means to be a qualifying AAPM participant shortly. So next slide. All right. So you can see on this slide, what is it about AAPMs? Well, you can see here MIPS participants here on the left that are not in an alternative payment model. They'll just receive a MIPS adjustment. As you sort of move in maturity from not in an APM and into an APM, you get a MIPS adjustment, but you also have APM-specific rewards that are included in the alternative payment model structure. Then the next group of folks participating in MIPS are the MIPS APM participants who get a special APM scoring standard towards their MIPS adjustment. And then they additionally, obviously, achieve APM-specific rewards through the APM. And then finally, the sort of most advanced alternative payment model, those folks obviously get rewards through their APM participation and additionally get a qualifying, if they're a qualifying participant, they get a 5% lump sum bonus. Next slide. So in order to be an advanced alternative payment model, there are 3 requirements that you must meet. First, participants must use a certified electronic health record technology. Next, providers' payments through their alternative payment model must be based on quality measures comparable to those used in MIPS for the quality performance category. And then lastly, either they're one in a medical home model expanded under CMS Innovation Center authority, or they are participants that bear a more than nominal amount of financial risk. Next slide. So there are a number of terms that we hope that participants come away with, and so we provided them here in the slide. An APM entity is an entity that participates in an APM and has a payment agreement with through a federal or state law or regulation. An advanced APM meets the 3 specific requirements that I listed before. An affiliated practitioner is an eligible clinician that is identified by a unique APM participant identifier on a CMS-maintained list through a contractual relationship. So these affiliated practitioner lists are used for our QP determinations. And then as well, MIPS APMs is the next term we'll go to. Most advanced APMs are also MIPS APMs. So if you're participating in a MIPS APM, you get a special scoring standard. We also have a participation list for many of our models. So this is a list for the APM entity and their participating providers. And then finally, qualifying APM participant, or QP, is an eligible clinician that's determined by CMS to have met or exceeded the relevant QP payment amount or QP patient count threshold for the year based on participation in an advanced alternative payment model entity. Next slide. So we have here a current list of our advanced APMs for 2019. So I won't read them off directly for you, but they're there for you to look at later. All right, so we'll go on to the next slide. All right, so I'm at the end of my section of the presentation. I'm going to hand it off to Richard Jensen, and he'll take you through the AllPayer Combination option.
Thanks, Trevi.
Yeah.
So the AllPayer Combination option kicks in this current year, the QP performance period 2019. And basically, up until now, there's been one pathway for clinicians to achieve QP status, and that was through the Medicare option, which is participating in the Medicare Advanced APMs that Trevi was describing to you. What happened this year was that the statute calls for the initiation of the AllPayer Combination option, which is an alternative way in which clinicians can achieve QP status, and they do that by looking at their status of a combination of their participation in advanced APMs in Medicare, as well as with OtherPayer Advanced APMs offered by other payers. Next slide. And this shows you a little bit more of the breakdown in the quality payment program. Trevi had alluded to the fact that clinicians can decide they're going to go down the MIPS path or the advanced APM path. And now this year we have a choice within the advanced APM path. They can qualify for QP status under the Medicare option, or if they don't quite achieve that, they can try the AllPayer Combination option and bring into account their participation in OtherPayer Advanced APMs. Next slide. So next slide, please. So what are OtherPayer Advanced APMs that I'm talking about here? Well, first of all, with regard to payer type, we are talking about payer types outside of Medicare fee-for-service, and that includes, as laid out by the legislation, Medicaid, in other words, payment arrangements that are either administered by state Medicaid agencies or Medicaid managed care organizations can be considered for OtherPayer Advanced APMs. Payment arrangements under Medicare health plans, which includes Medicare Advantage, can be considered OtherPayer Advanced APMs. Payment arrangements that are aligned with CMS multi-payer models such as CPC Plus, these are commercial alignments. They can be considered OtherPayer Advanced APM. And in addition, all other commercial and private payers out in the marketplace. So as you can see, OtherPayer Advanced APMs can be drawn through payment arrangements from a wide variety of payers throughout the marketplace. Next slide. So what exactly is an OtherPayer Advanced APM? And in particular, what's helpful is to think about how do they relate to Medicare Advanced APMs? Well, as it turns out, they have similar, although not identical, criteria to advanced APMs. First of all, there has to be participation in insert that's required. I will note here that in the current year, the OtherPayer Advanced APM participation rate required is 50%, whereas it's 75% for Medicare Advanced APMs. Other payers will require 75% by next year, so there's just a one-year lag here. In addition, payments must be tied to quality measures that are comparable to MIPS. And the third criteria is that if there's a Medicaid medical home model that meets the criteria that is comparable to the medical home model that's been expanded under CMMI Innovation Authority, or that a clinician is required to bear more than nominal amount of financial risk if actual aggregate expenditures exceed expected aggregate expenditures. That's a mouthful. It basically means that there is a downside risk in the payment arrangement that the eligible clinician must assume. Next slide. So let me tell you a little bit about that third criteria about the financial risk and downside risk. When we look at that in a payment arrangement, we assess the payment arrangement in a two-step process. First of all, we look and see if financial risk is present, and the requirements we have on financial risk being present is that one of these three elements listed here must be in place. In other words, withhold payments for services to the entity or the eligible clinician must be a potential option, or reduced payment rates may be an instrument to place financial risk on the entity or clinician, or that a required direct payment by the APM entity to the payer is in play. This is just saying that at least one of these has to be in place for us to consider the financial risk is actually in the payment arrangement. Next slide. Now, assuming that requirement is met, the next step is, okay, is there a nominal amount of risk in the payment arrangement? And we have two ways, two standards here that we have for measuring nominal amount. First, we have an expenditure-based nominal amount standard, and that requires that the payment arrangement, in order to be an OtherPayer Advanced APM, must have a marginal risk of at least 30%, a minimum loss rate of no more than 4%, and a total risk of at least 3% of expected expenditures, or what's more commonly known as the benchmark. Now, we do allow for a revenue-based nominal amount standard in models that are expressly defined in terms of revenue, so they're not nearly as numerous as the expenditure-based. But similarly, the nominal amount of risk under a revenue-based payment arrangement would have to be marginal risk at 3%, minimum loss rate of no more than 4%, and in the current period, a total risk of at least 8% of combined revenues from the payer and providers at other entities under the payment arrangement. Next slide. I do want to point out that under the OtherPayer Advanced APM, we have established a definition of Medicaid medical home model. For those of you familiar with QPP, you'll know that we also have a medical home model definition for Medicare. The Medicaid medical home model is identical. In other words, the two required components that participants include primary care practices, et cetera, and that empanelment of each patient, the empanelment occur for each patient to a primary clinician. And then the list on the right side, there are 7 items, and at least 4 of those elements must be present in the model. The reason we developed these definitions is that we realize that a lot of the clinicians that are operating in such models would not be able to handle the risk that's normally that we've devised for other types of entities such as ACO, and we have a slightly less stringent risk level that they must meet if they meet a Medicaid medical home model definition. Next slide. Okay, let me talk about the payment arrangement options now and how we decide on those. So within the Medicare option, we're dealing with Medicare models that Trevi described. And of course, all those payment arrangements and models are within CMS. We're the ones that developed them and put them out in the marketplace. But by its nature, the AllPayer Combination option is looking to other payers for potential payment arrangements that might qualify. And therefore, we have to reach out to the marketplace and have these payment arrangements reported to us and identified. So to do that, what we've done is we've put together a 2-step process for two options by which we might identify payment arrangements that are OtherPayer Advanced APMs in the marketplace. The first is that we have a payer-initiated process. This is a voluntary process. We have these submissions occur prior to the QP performance period. In other words, for example, OtherPayer Advanced APMs that are identified by payers for 2019 were submitted last year, and we identified them and then posted them and let the marketplace know that they existed. I will be going through that in a little more detail in a minute. The second option is that clinicians themselves can report payment arrangements therein that they believe to be OtherPayer Advanced APMs. And this is particularly important for them to report when they, in fact, are submitting information and data to try to become a QP under the all-payer combination option. And the deadline to do that is at the conclusion of the QP performance period. In other words, a clinician who's looking to become a QP in 2019 will report this information on the payment arrangement later this fall. Next slide. Just so you know a little more detail about the payer-initiated process, we've set up really 3 lanes for reporting such information. We have a process for state Medicaid agencies to report in either their payment arrangements or Medicaid MCO payment arrangements in their state. And we have a certain set time period in which we have them come in through a designated portal to report this information. We also have a process for Medicare health plans, including Medicare Advantage, to report payment arrangements that they believe are OtherPayer Advanced APMs. And in fact, that's done as part of the HPMS annual bidding for Medicare Advantage. There's a module in there that allows plans to submit payment arrangements they believe meet our OtherPayer Advanced alternative payment criteria. And just to mention, we have guidance material on our website that provides instruction on how to submit all of this. And I guess that's it on this page. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I should mention that once we complete the assessment, as I mentioned before, we post our assessments at the beginning of the year at the website, and I'll give you the dates in a minute. So anyway, I mentioned that eligible clinicians would report at the end of a QP performance period any OtherPayer Advanced APMs they're aware of. The idea here is that they would be able to look at the established list that we've already posted through the payer-initiated process, and they would only need to report on payment arrangements that weren't already listed there. In other words, we were trying, by creating the payer-initiated process, to have payers to do most of the reporting if possible, because obviously it's easier for them to do in terms of them being the developer of the payment arrangements and having the resources to report them in. But we will have portals available at the end of this year so that individual clinicians or APM entities will be able to report in payment arrangements they believe to be OtherPayer Advanced APMs. And we will have guidance material out on that, et cetera. Next slide. So here's a little schematic to lay out these important dates in 2019. And as you can see, in Medicaid, we took submissions from the states between January and April. We will be posting the OtherPayer Advanced APMs we determined were submitted by state Medicaid agencies. And then we have a process in late 2019 for eligible clinicians to submit the payment arrangements that they identify themselves to us. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Medicaid submissions by eligible clinicians in a minute. As you can see with the CMS multi-payer models, and actually this year it's more broadly the all commercial payment models, the submission period to us is between January and June. And again, we will do our determinations on those through the summer, and we will post all of those payment arrangements submitted to us that we believe are OtherPayer Advanced APMs in September as well. And then, as I spoke to earlier, later in the year, the eligible clinicians will be able to report to us about OtherPayer Advanced APMs they believe they're participating in. Next slide. I just want to spend a minute on this. There's a little bit of a unusual process in the submission, I mentioned that Medicaid eligible clinicians submit in the fall. They too, like payers, have to submit the year before the actual QP performance period in question. For example, they had to submit in 2018 for quality performance, QP performance period 2019, and similarly this year they'll submit early for 2020. The reason for this difference on the submission OtherPayer Advanced APM by eligible clinicians in Medicaid is that Medicaid is one payer that can be excluded from the AllPayer combination option when we actually make combination calculations, QP calculations at the end of the year. And because we can, they can be excluded, we actually have to identify all of the Medicaid OtherPayer Advanced APMs around the country before the QP performance period begins. If we were not to identify ahead of time, Medicaid clinicians would not know that they, in fact, are going to be held accountable for Medicaid payments in their state, and therefore wouldn't have an ability to become enrolled. I can answer more questions about this later. I know it's kind of complex, but that's why we have eligible clinicians in the process a little bit early. Next slide. And this is just the Medicare health plans or Medicare Advantage process I mentioned earlier. They can submit between April and June this year, which is the same as the HPMS Medicare Advantage bidding timeframe, and they actually submit through the HPMS process. They have a QPP module for that. And similarly, clinicians can submit information on Medicare Advantage payment arrangements later in the year. Next slide. So how do we do actually make QP determinations under the AllPayer combination option? Let's walk through that. So the first step is a clinician has to think about whether or not they, in fact, need to pursue the AllPayer combination option or whether the Medicare option would be sufficient. And as I mentioned, the threshold level for participation in advanced APMs under Medicare in 2019 is 50%. It just went up to 50%. So if a clinician or entity is already at 50% with Medicare participation, they need go no further. In other words, they've met QP status through the Medicare option, and they don't need to look at the AllPayer combination option. It's also true that in order to participate in the AllPayer combination option, you do have to continue to be part of a Medicare Advanced APM. It's a necessary condition that you participate in a Medicare model. And in fact, you have to participate at least at 25% of your overall practice. So if for some reason an entity or a clinician is below 25%, they are not going to qualify through participating in the AllPayer combination option. And this is all by way of letting you know that that band in the middle there, the 25% to 50%, if a eligible clinician falls within that range in terms of participation in Medicare Advanced APMs, they're a candidate to actually pursue the AllPayer combination option. In other words, they're participating at a sufficient level to qualify under the option, but they haven't reached the 50% threshold level. And so they may want to look and see, are there other payer arrangements I can bring into this equation literally that might get me over the 50% threshold level. Next slide. So if a clinician or entity is going to pursue the AllPayer combination option, the next step is they want to identify all the payment arrangements that may be relevant to them. First, they would look at the OtherPayer Advanced APM lists that have already been published that we put together through our payer identification that I mentioned earlier. And then, as I mentioned, they would have the opportunity to submit other payment arrangements they may be aware of that have not been identified by CMS to date. We'll have a process for that they can submit it. Next slide. So once all the OtherPayer Advanced APMs that the clinician or entity are in have been identified, the next step is they have to submit their actual participation among all other payers. And we depend on the clinicians or entities to submit this data. They have some choices when they do this. It's just as we have snapshot periods in the quality QP performance period. Under Medicare, we have similar snapshots for payments and patient data to come in under the OtherPayer Advanced APMs. And again, I won't go through each of these, but there's 3 snapshots time periods available. And so the clinician or entity will have to select one of these time slots and submit their information accordingly. Next slide. So we go about actually calculating the QP threshold or score by taking the information we already have from Medicare and combining it with the information that's been submitted by the entity or clinician. Now, just to clarify, this is called the AllPayer Combination option, and so that means that we're going to have to look at Medicare payments or patients. We're going to look at payments or patients submitted by the clinician or entity that are with payers that had OtherPayer Advanced APMs. And in addition, we are going to look at payments that are that the entity or clinician receive from each of their other payers but do not have OtherPayer Advanced APMs. Again, it's not limited just to outside payers who, in fact, have an innovative payment arrangement, but in fact, in order to calculate the denominator in these ratios, we have to have all the data from all of their payers. And then what we will do is we will calculate it in 2 ways. We do it using the payment amount data that we are submitted by the clinician or entity. We do it as a patient count method with the data submitted, and we will take the best threshold score according to these two processes and award it to the clinician and see if they can achieve the 50% level. Next slide. This is just a reference to the Medicaid exclusion again. Next slide. So this decision tree is to provide you a little bit of a schematic to help you understand, again, what the clinician is going through in terms of the step-by-step actions they're going to be taking. As I mentioned earlier, in 2019, if a clinician has already made the Medicare threshold score of 50%, they have reached QP status and need go no further. But if they haven't, but are achieving at least a Medicare threshold score of 25%, they can proceed to the AllPayer Combination option. And if they get a 50% threshold score from that, they achieve QP status. I won't go through each of the other branches except to say that there is such a thing as partial QP that I think some of you folks know about. Under that, they don't actually get a bonus payment, but clinicians are exempt from MIPS and MIPS reporting. And as you can see, if they fall below some of these critical levels, they in fact will be just simply have to participate in MIPS and report to MIPS. Next slide. Okay, Corey, that was a mouthful for me. I think I'll hand it back to you right now.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Richard. And I hope that with the questions we have here, we'll be able to not only give a lot more clarity, but answer some questions. We have some additional time here. I'd like to go to the next slide and to help and support. One of the things that you guys will note here is that we have technical assistance. This technical assistance is available for free. If you have questions, you would like additional information, please feel free to always go to qpp.cms.gov to find additional resources. In addition to the resources we provide there, we also have an 800 number, and the 800 number is found on the QPP website. Again, qpp.cms.gov. We have many drop-downs there. We have the MIPS drop-down, the APM drop-down. We also have additional resources, including papers, documents, and then also documents that you can download similar to this. Next slide, please. So here, I wanted to point to some of the drop-downs I talked about. Here, when you go to qpp.cms.gov, you'll see that there's a APM drop-down. Next slide, please. And under that APM drop-down, if you go back to the previous slide, my apologies, we used to have a second slide there. But under this drop-down, you'll see that there are multiple drop-downs that will give you APMs, Alternative Payment Models Overview. You'll also find that we have the Advanced APM Overview. We also have the MIPS APM Overview, and these are very short blurbs that provide just enough information for you to go seek more information. We also have names of the models listed. And most importantly, we have the AllPayer Advanced Alternative Payment Model drop-down that gives you some explanation around what we just covered in this presentation. Next slide, please. Here again, additional resources that you can find, the AllPayer Combination option. All of these papers and documents are available under the resource library when you go to qpp.cms.gov, and you can find them out and learn about the list of Medicare Health Plan OtherPayer APMs, the QPP Multi-Payer OtherPayer Advanced APMs, Medicaid OtherPayer Advanced APMs, as Richard just spoke about. And then we have 2018 resources there also, which we are updating, but many of them that we speak to are already up to date in the sense that they provide you just an overview of how to prepare and plan for what's to come in this current year. One of the key resources I wanted to point out is this 2018 comprehensive list of APMs. That resource was updated in November of 2018, so it still does say 2018, but it does have the 2019 models listed there too. One of the key things that you'll love about that is that as we get more models online, you will then get and see an updated document, and we're constantly updating these documents on the website. So constantly checking out for that and signing up for our listserv so that you will get more information as it comes available. Next slide, please. So with that said, I'm going to pass it back over to our moderators, those that are helping us moderate this call, and they will handle it from here.
We are now going to start the Q&A portion of the webinar. You can ask questions via chat or phone. To ask a question via phone, please dial 1-866-452-7887. The number again, 1-866-452-7887. If prompted, please enter ID 778-3637. The ID number again, 778-3637. Once you join the conference, please press star 1 to ask a question. Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad at this time. Once again, in order to ask an audio question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. There are no questions in queue at this time.
And I like to say that if you guys have any questions that you put in the Q&A and you feel like you wanted more information, while you have myself from communications, Richard Jensen being a policy lead with all the work that they do, it's hard to get them available for these calls. So please use that resource. And then also Trevi Davis with the operations knowledge. So we're here for you, and we'll hang online for any questions, but wanted to prompt you to not be afraid to ask any questions that you may have posed in the Q&A.
We have an audio question from Dan Carica.
Hi, Richard. This is Dan from Austin, Texas. We spoke probably a couple of years ago about the intersection between the QPP and the Medicaid APMs. As you know, that there is a lot of advancement in the alternative payment models in the Medicaid managed care, and I'm referring to the HCP-LAN framework. Is it any plan from your perspective to intersect with those arrangements, and how would those be considered into the all-payer alternative that you are proposing?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Dan. So we certainly do. We have actually received some MCO payment arrangements, Medicaid MCO payment arrangements in one state to date, like we did last year. We do require MCOs, Medicaid MCOs, to make their submissions through the state agency. We made that requirement because we felt it was important that the state agency have an idea of what actually was being submitted. But we have received payment arrangements that were submitted from Medicaid MCOs, and we did determine, in fact, they are OtherPayer Advanced APMs, and you can see them on our list. So we are taking those in, and we had another batch come in this year, although we haven't finished our analysis of them yet. But certainly we believe that Medicaid MCOs are an important part of this, and in particular, as you know, with the dominance of Medicaid MCOs cover so many lives under in Medicaid programs around the country that, in fact, I suspect it's much more likely that the MCO arrangements, and in particular in many states, is much more likely to be an OtherPayer Advanced APM, something we want to look at as opposed to simply the Medicaid fee-for-service program.
Okay, thank you.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Your next question is from Luis Galterio.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. I tried to send this on the chat, but I don't know if you saw it. We're going to try to start working with virtual groups in Florida because we do have an exposure into the rural area, and we have organizations that are just interested in joining virtual groups across the country. And of course, a lot of these doctors will have different payers, and we're also getting involved now. One of our Miami clients has Medicare Advantage people that have gotten involved in the test pilot with Medicare Advantage becoming an APM. So my question is there seems to be a very good or potentially good fit with virtual groups and the all-payer options, since many of them take more than one payer in. And I was wondering, has there been any thought on the CMS side on that, dynamic?
We haven't really looked at it on the all-payer side. I know that virtual groups was a part of MIPS, and I'm actually have to plead a little ignorance here. Maybe Trevi can fill in about to the extent they exist in the advanced APMs. It's something I guess potentially we would look at in the future. We'd probably have to talk about it now, but more about putting the policy in place. It's not something we're prepared to do right now, but maybe in the future.
Right. Well, like I said, some of our clients are already in the Medicare Advantage pilot to make a Medicare Advantage an APM, and that's in the Miami area. And I'm just wondering if some of those people would fit into the virtual groups. But I realize this is a question that is probably a future question, but I did want to bring it up. So thank you for listening.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1. We'll pause for just a moment.
While we pause, I will say to the gentleman that just asked the question about virtual groups, you'll find that virtual groups is a subset, and it provides a way for groups to come together. As you mentioned, the small, the rural, and the underserved clinicians that want to come together to form groups. You can find additional information there under qpp.cms.gov by looking on the drop-down under MIPS, and you'll be able to find additional information there around how those groups are formed, what the policies are around that, and also in the final rule from last year. If you have additional questions, feel free to call our service center, and they'll be able to help you. And to Richard's point, I know that they're looking at all ways that clinicians can win under QPP.
Your next question is from Kip Porter.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my question here. We noticed our practice participates in a Medicare Advantage contract that's identified currently in an OtherPayer APM with United 4590. However, they say right now they're not submitting us as part of their data as an OtherPayer APM. So my question is it possible for us to submit our own data under the eligible clinician initiated process? And if so, that process doesn't start until the end of this year, correct?
Yeah, so just to be clear, and thank you for the question because it's an important one. In the AllPayer Combination option, participation data for us is all going to have to come from either the individual clinician or the APM entity or their a third party assisting them. We do not receive any data from the payers. The payers can help us determine what are OtherPayer Advanced APMs that are in place, but the actual participation data we're dependent on the clinicians to do. Part of that, the reason for that is we have no authority to require payers to provide information. So yes, we would look to you and whichever, whether it's individual clinicians, as I said, or an APM entity, to submit that data to us at the end of this year. Again, we were talking about QP performance period 2019. And you'll see information will be coming out. We'll open up the portals for data submission in September, and you'll have it'll be September 1st, and you'll have until December 1st to submit the data to us. And by the way, and this is related to a question that's I'm talking about different levels. This is related to a chat question that came in. On the AllPayer Combination option side, we give the submitter a choice of whether we'll make the calculations at the APM entity level, the TIN level, or the individual eligible clinician level. That will be up to the submitter to tell us which way they want to do it. Once they tell us that that's the way we will go, we won't do different combinations for them per se, but once they select that level and submit the data, we'll make the calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad.
Somebody submitted a question, Peggy, about is there a way to find out if our state Medicaid agency even applied to become a Medicaid Advanced APM, or what we call an OtherPayer Advanced APM? Yes, you'd go to our website that Corey was referring to earlier, and there we have a QPP, it's a QPP website. You go into the resource library, and you can find in under 2018 submissions, I guess, that there'll be a listing there of the 2019 Medicaid OtherPayer Advanced APMs. And you can find out if your agency is there. I don't want to get into specific states on this call, but I will tell you that we just had a few states last year actually submit payment arrangements. There's obviously a new program. States are just learning about it as well. It's also true, not a majority of states actually are operating OtherPayer Advanced APMs to the best of my knowledge. And so there's just a few states that actually have identified OtherPayer Advanced APMs at this time.
At this time, there are no additional audio questions. If you would like to ask it.
I see one other, I'm sorry, I see one other Q&A that came in through the chat box from Kip. For Medicare Advantage practice and performance year 2019, is the deadline for the eligible clinician initiated process in 2020 or the end of 2019? It's at the end of 2019. In other words, it is at the end of the same year of the performance period in question that you should submit information about your payment arrangements.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. There are no additional questions at this time.
I'm sorry, I'm rolling down here a little bit further. From Jane, we were asked, will APM entities also need to submit a list of NPIs for clinicians in the ACO, for example, or is CMS assuming the composition is exactly the same for CMS and the other payer? We will be assuming that the composition is the same rather than have you submit a very lengthy list of NPIs. So again, we have the list of NPIs for a particular entity in the Medicare model, and we'll use it the same when we calculate AllPayer. Next, somebody asked the question, will the QP patient count threshold change from year to year or next year, or will it remain the same? It will remain the same for 2 more years, and then it goes up in QP performance year 2021, and then it'll remain at a set level. But the statute set this up so the initial year it was a certain level, then the year 3 and 4 it went up, and then 5 and 6 it'll go up again and then remain there.
And just to add to that from a communications perspective, one of the things that we often say that is true is that we're listening to you, that being the clinicians, the surrogates, and anyone else who has any policy recommendations that they'd like to submit. So every year during the proposed rule and the final rule when we take comments, please feel free to always chime in because we are listening to you. One of the things that Richard was speaking about is that we wanted to move our clinicians and their TENs, their organizations, into a process that allowed for them to grow along with the program and not to feel the ultimate pressure when coming into the program that they need to do a major amount of work initially. So as we continue in the program, one of the things that Richard's speaking about with the AllPayer and OtherPayer Combination option is looking at multiple ways for those clinicians who are doing well already to continue to do well by meeting the QP designation. So just another tidbit there. We have 5 minutes left. Didn't know if Richard may have seen another question, if there's a question on the phone. If not, we wanted to give that time back to you. So I'll let the moderators decide from there. But thank you all for calling in. We really do appreciate you continuing to come to our calls, our webinars, and learning about QPP from the alternative payment model side.
Again, if you would like to ask an audio question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We do have a follow-up from Kip Porter.
Hi, thank you. Just a quick one. The certified platform requirement for the APM, is it required that we use that for the entire performance year 2019, or can it be partial?
And just to clarify that question, you talk about the certified EHR technology?
Correct.
So I think that Richard could probably clarify. I believe it has to be for the full year.
Oh, we think of it for the year, yeah. It should be in your contract for the year.
And you can get additional information about the certified EHR technology right from the ONC. ONC actually oversees. ONC is the website. The Office of National Counsel provides some information on the 2015 certified EHR technology certification. So that will provide more understanding around what your certified EHR technology is. And then I think Richard spoke to the 50% and 75% of clinicians using that certified EHR technology for the year. So more information, if you need, is always available by going to our website and also by our service center.
Okay, thank you.
Kip, I see you wrote in another question. Just to confirm, a practice should qualify as an OtherPayer Advanced based on Medicare Advantage participation.
Yeah, that was.
There's nothing more to submit. Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah, if they qualify Medicare, nothing more needs to be submitted. It's only if they, for example, if they have 45% participation and they want to get to need to get to 50, then they would pursue the AllPayer and submit something at the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no additional questions at this time. I'll turn it back over to management for closing remarks.
Yes, just wanted to say thank you again for dialing in today, for listening to our webinar. The information will be made available once the transcript is verified and cleared. We will have the recording available at your disposal by going to qpp.cms.gov. Again, we look forward to working with you. Again, we have additional calls and webinars coming out. Look forward to our listserv. Sign up to our listserv to learn more information about qpp.cms.gov. And please go to qpp.cms.gov to learn about all of our updates on the website. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you. This